Welcome to the Unstoppable CEO podcast. I'm your host, Steve Gordon, and today I'm going to continue in our series on the less I do, the more I make. And this one, honestly, this is a little uncomfortable because the last few weeks, we kind of hit some roadblocks with this whole plan. And I thought it'd actually be really useful if I shared that. So that's what we're going to do today. Stay tuned. Hey friends, it's Steve. If I offered to write a client getting book for you in just 60 days, would you take me up on it? I've recorded a 15-minute video showing you our magnetic author method and explaining how it all works. It's up now at magneticauthor.co/video. All right, so we're really kind of on this journey. I started back in January, and I think we're about 5 episodes in now to this series on the podcast, talking about the less I do, the more I make. That's kind of been my mantra for the year because I got to a point where I couldn't grow the business anymore by working anymore. The hustle lost its effectiveness. There was no growth left in it. And the only way to multiply the business from here is to simplify. And I got to start with myself. And so that's the journey we're on. I thought it'd be really useful to share that. And so if you haven't heard any of the earlier episodes, you can go find them on our podcast. Go to unstoppableceo.net/podcast, or you can go to our YouTube channel. You can find that by going to unstoppableceo.net/YouTube, and you'll be redirected to that, and you can see the videos. And some of the earlier videos are they're going to actually be helpful because there's some things that I show in those. I describe them, so if you're listening, you'll still get the gist, but you might want to go back and watch some of those earlier videos. So today I want to talk about some of the roadblocks that I've run into with this plan. And I think the first thing to really understand, that at least that I've learned from them over the last couple of weeks, is that setbacks are going to happen. That's part of this process. If you're going to transform yourself within your business, if you're going to free up your time, there are going to be weeks where things don't go to plan, where you get thrown off and you're kind of back in this situation where you're working more than you want to work. And I ran into that over the last couple of weeks. And so I think the first thing to understand is that it just happens. And I was actually feeling a little bit like a fraud. Here I am recording these episodes, sharing this stuff with you. And I experienced a couple of weeks where it just really wasn't working the way that I wanted it to. And I think that's part of the process. And I think it's important to know that. First, when you encounter that, don't quit. It's a little discouraging, but if you step back then and say, all right, we've run into a flaw in the plan. And that's really the way I kind of took it. Is I got through some tough weeks of work. We got some things done. We got some projects out the door. We got some books finished for people. We onboarded some new podcasting clients. All of that's fantastic. I worked a lot more than I wanted to. And that just pointed out to me where there were processes that were still too much in my head. And even though we've got a good process, it wasn't developed with enough clarity for me to hand it off. And our book process is an example of that. And the way we've been doing it, as we've kind of evolved and innovated that process, a lot of the moving parts of it were in my head, and I was handling the coordination of it all. And I found that when we got busy there, I couldn't free myself up anymore because I hadn't gotten clear enough on how to coordinate all the parts. Even though I had good people and team members in place, I had people doing writing and editing, and we just brought on a new design team, and we're just really elevated the level of design of the books, both covers, and we're doing interior cartoons and books and custom illustrations and all this cool stuff. But I was having to coordinate all of that. And I hadn't refined it to the point where it was clear enough that I could hand it off to somebody. And so I looked at these setbacks as really the opportunity and the illumination of places where I needed to do more work. So I think that's the way to approach this. When you're trying to free yourself up and you have these periods of time when it's just not working for you, step back and don't get discouraged by it, but figure out what needs to be adjusted. So like I said, I used it as an opportunity to get really, really clear and really develop my vision for what I wanted some of these processes to look like. And honestly, it only took about an hour. So I sat with our operations manager And I said, look, I've failed you because I haven't given you the ability to succeed. I want you to manage all of these and kind of make sure all the trains run on time. But you don't know what the train schedule is. You don't know where the tracks are going, and you don't know how many tickets we've sold. And so we need to sit down. And I said, let's just take an hour and see how far we get. Well, it turns out in an hour, we had the whole thing mapped out. And not only did we have it mapped out, we actually improved the system probably 5 or 10 times from where it was. So just the act of mapping that out, this 8-week process that we go through to write a book for somebody and laying it out, looking for, okay, where are the friction points? Where are the places where we're doing really well? And that's a thinking process. I actually learned that from Dan Sullivan in Strategic Coach. He calls it the experience transformer, but you basically just ask yourself, what worked in this situation and what didn't work? And knowing what we know now, what do we want to do differently? And so we just asked that question. And in about an hour, we redesigned the whole system. And in the process of redesigning it, now I was able to communicate my vision really clearly. She was able to ask questions, and we've got an improved system. She's now empowered to understand exactly how it's all working, so she can start to take it off of my plate. So I'm not having to do all this coordination. And in the process of all of that, we identified the few places where we needed additional documentation, where, particularly around some of the creative and strategic stuff, I really needed to focus on creating resources that will allow us to teach other people to do that. So that as we grow, it's, all of the growth isn't still reliant on me for the strategy and the creativity. And I'm a big believer that there isn't anyone in a business that is irreplaceable, including the CEO. So I'm always looking for ways that I can take the stuff that I'm doing. That I've developed these skills over time. I wasn't born this way. So how did I develop the skill to be able to look at somebody's business and help them solve a marketing problem? There's a process to that. And so getting that documented, there were a few places that we needed to get that documented, breaking down a book so that it is, we take somebody's intellectual property and we structure it so that it's really persuasive. That's something I'm really good at. I've developed that skill. Well, now I need to be able to teach that skill to our writers so that they can take that off my plate. I'm pretty good at developing titles and writing and all that. So how do I take all of those things and document them and create training resources so that we can begin bringing people in and taking the team that we have and up-leveling their skills as well. Every time we do that, I get some more freedom. So that's kind of how we've responded to these setbacks over the last few weeks. And I got to give my team a ton of credit because they're totally bought into making this transformation happen. And I think part of the reason that they're doing that is that I think I frustrate the hell out of them when I hold on to stuff. They want to do their job. They're good people. And if I don't get clear in my head about what it is that they need to do to be successful and how they can best support me, then they get frustrated by that, And so if you've got good people, I guarantee you they're thinking the same thing. They're like, well, I want this guy to get out of my way and just let me do my thing. And so this last couple of weeks has been a lesson for me in that. And so the other thing that I'm finding here is that every time I encounter one of these setbacks and I kind of take this view of it, it is creating a new leap in productivity. And it's a leap in productivity because we're improving systems that we probably were taking for granted. It's a leap in productivity because I'm literally allowed to be more productive because of the teamwork that we're creating. The team is allowed to be more productive because they're now clear on what they're supposed to do. So the benefits are just enormous. Anyway, so I wanted to share that in this week's episode. This is a little bit of a shorter episode, but I think a really important one. As you're trying to go through this process yourself, hopefully you're following along. I hope you're working on getting yourself freed up and creating some extra time for yourself so you've got some more leverage. As you do that, know that it isn't going to be perfect. So I hope this helps. This is the way I'm approaching it. Would love to get your feedback on this and on all these episodes. I can't tell you, we've had more comments and emails on this series of episodes than we've had on we're over 200 episodes now on the podcast, and nothing has gotten this kind of feedback. So I'm grateful for the feedback. It kind of encourages me to keep going and sharing with you as I'm learning things in this process. And anyway, if you got a specific question or something comes up in your world and you'd like me to address it related to this, let me know. And we'll be back with a new episode next week. See you then.
Thanks for listening to the Unstoppable CEO podcast. Help others discover this show. Leave a review and rating on iTunes at unstoppableceo.net/iTunes.